The following argument pretty much is this. We don't want you here because you have nothing to offer this sport. No, you don't want us there because you're greedy and don't want the prize pot diluted. This is pretty much the argument between both sides of Andretti applying to Formula One. Now, this is not a new thing going on here. Michael Andretti has been trying to get into Formula One since the end of the 2021 season, I believe, when he announced his intentions to be the 11th team on the grid by at least 2025, the year before the new engine regulations come in. Now, he announced this, and he also announced he intended to partner with Renault as a customer engine. Now, Alpine wasn't opposed to this. A customer engine deal with a new team gives them opportunity to research into the new engine for 2026 and where to improve on this old engine. The problem is, well, as you probably heard from the entrance, money. Lots and lots of money. Now, when Andretti first proposed this entry into Formula One with Renault engines, it was kind of like someone at the bar talking to that guy or girl who they don't know is a huge gold digger, but are trying to just strike up a casual conversation with them. And said gold digger is just pretending to be interested while silently hoping that you just go away and leave them alone. However, towards the end of the 2022 season, Andretti announced a partnership with Cadillac as an engine supplier, which meant that GM, one of the biggest motor manufacturers in the world right now, would be building the engine and Cadillac would be the sponsor branding, if you will. And it was only at this point when the gold digger all of a sudden became interested. Oh really? How interesting. Do please tell me more about this. So all of a sudden, F1 are now interested because they now have an American team with a potential American engine supplier coming into their sport. Just what they needed to break into the American market even more than what they already wanted to. However, the F1 teams have taken a massive stance against this. Majority of them, anyway. Two teams have already given their full support. One, the aforementioned Alpine. As I said, Alpine will be an engine supplier to Andretti in 2025 should they come into the sport by then. And then eventually in 2026 they'll have their own engines for the new regulations. But a 1-year customer deal supplying engines to a new team will not be a bad thing for Alpine. I mean, it's a cash injection and also they get feedback from the engine and where to develop it should they need to. The other is Zak Brown of McLaren. Again, nothing new. Zak Brown and Michael Andretti are good friends anyway, and they've had previous business dealings in the past, so no-brainer. The problem is the other 8 teams. Now, the main content is this. Having an 11th team on the grid, as I said, dilutes the prize pot. So not every team is getting as much as what they would have done. Now, you can argue Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, it wouldn't bother them so much. I mean, they make more money out of sponsorship than what they do anything, especially Ferrari with their key rings and their hats and so on. But if we go further down the grid to teams like Haas and Williams, well, they're really not going to want that team in there because, well, they need the money more than anything else to keep afloat. Now, this is not a malicious intent at all from Haas or Williams. This is just them protecting their own interests. Every F1 team needs that cash injection to stay afloat, and even Williams and Haas are no exception to this. The main thing we're looking at is what the F1 argument is saying. You have nothing to bring to this sport. Well, the thing is, with Andretti, yes, he has the name, and yes, his father was probably one of the best all-round drivers who could jump into anything and drive it quickly. But we're not talking about Mario Andretti, we're talking about Michael and what he's done with his team, which is pretty good. He has multiple IndyCar titles and race wins with his team. He also has several cars running in the IMSA series, which is Americans Endurance Championship. And also they have a partnership in the V8 Supercar Series with Walkinshaw Andretti United, which also have several race wins to their name. So it's not like the team doesn't know what it's doing. They have success in multiple categories of motorsport. Cadillac as well also has success in IMSA with its own program, so again, no-brainer. The thing is, though, is from the F1 team's perspective and from the FIA perspective as well, it really is all about the money aspect and the promotion, so to speak. F1 has been trying to break into America for as long as possible, and now it's got a firm, strong foothold in there. We already currently have 2 races, one at the Circuit of the Americas in Texas, a new one last year at Miami, and a potential 3rd race this year in Las Vegas. On top of that, Netflix has its Drive to Survive series, which has opened up the sport to more people around the United States as a whole. So it's not a bad marketing exercise as well. Yeah, you can argue they had a strong foothold in the 80s, but it was pretty much just a blender of circuits that could be thrown up as and when, and, there was no permanent facility after Watkins Glen until COTA Indianapolis in 2000, and then COTA in 2012, where we are now. The thing with the FIA is they want this American team on the grid. The teams do not, for said reasons I mentioned earlier, and so there's infighting there. However, it seems that the president of the FIA is pushing forward with this application for Andretti into the sport, and Michael himself is just going about his business, prepping the deals necessary in order to make this deal worthwhile. It really is, I don't know, how would you put it? Conflict of interest from all sides, if you will. The FIA are willing to welcome new teams onto the grid. The current established teams don't want another new team on the grid because it's going to affect their income. Andretti wants to get onto the grid to prove that he can race alongside the biggest names in the sport and win. Doesn't anyone? But you could argue again that this is a money thing on Andretti's part. Andretti wants to get into the sport, make the money from it. It's not really about the racing. Fair argument. But why go to all the trouble to bring in Cadillac and GM as a whole, if that was the case? General Motors itself no longer sells cars on the European market after Saab went under in 2012 and Vauxhall, by proxy Opel, was sold off as well. So having something like this to appeal to the European market again wouldn't be so much of an issue. Having Cadillac as a sponsor also helps with their image as well. Because when you say to a person Cadillac in Europe, the only 2 things they think of are the CTS, Saloon, or the Escalade, which is commonly referred to as that big unnecessary 4x4 that only shows up in rap videos with about 10 million speakers and screens and headrests, or the 4x4 that's seen flying through the air in every Hollywood blockbuster. I know, I was one of those people. I don't know. It's probably one of those things that we need to wait and see what happens before we make any real judgment on it. But not allowing more teams onto the grid is... well, I don't really get the idea behind that, because surely if you want to improve the sport, or the show as they call it, surely the better way to do that would be to have more teams on the grid rather than having more races. Having more races is just going to tire out everyone. Engineers, drivers, team principals, everyone. They're going to be so tired having to do 3 triple headers a year, not being able to see their families, and the mechanics have got to do all of this, taking down all the equipment, packing it up, moving it to the next venue, putting it up again on 0 hours sleep. And jet lagged, by the way, in case of moving from Azerbaijan to Canada this year, or last year. Surely having a grid full of 13 teams and 26 cars, the maximum you can have, would be a much better spectacle than having 24 races run by people who are so tired they don't even know what time it is, as you can tell by me. I don't know. it's probably one of these things that are going to end up blowing over when the whole thing passes and Andretti turn up in 2025 anyway, and everyone's just going to forget about the whole scenario. But I digress. The problem is that these F1 teams are saying, oh, you have nothing to offer the sport, but Andretti do. They do have a lot of experience elsewhere. They just don't have nothing to Formula One. Well, if you don't let them into Formula One, how can they prove themselves? They have the experience. They know what they're doing in motorsport. There's no reason not to. This is the problem they had with the earlier teams in 2010, Virgin, Lotus, and HRT. They let those teams in with very little experience, who had no prior experience beforehand, and they just sank completely. From my perspective, Andretti wants to be in Formula One and do well. Now, you can say it's a money thing or whatever, but until the deal is actually done, we can't say anything. Andretti is working his best to try and make this Cadillac deal work, and he already has the $200 million entrance fee to apply for a new team on the grid. So it's not like this is just a whimsical thing. Michael Andretti is serious about making this work. And honestly, I kind of hope he does. I mean, if he's putting all this effort in, making all these deals, and actually having the substance to prove it, unlike the US F1 team, well, there's not really so much harm in giving the man a chance. He knows what he's doing, he's an experienced team owner, and he's had multiple success elsewhere. There's no harm in just trying. But that is my opinion. If you guys have your own opinion, do feel free to leave a comment down below. It's a free discussion. People can express their own thoughts, so as long as they're not malicious or contradicting in any way, we're free to have an open discussion about it. You're more than welcome to. So leave that comment down below. Do feel free to like and share this video around it. It really helps. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of those videos. I'm David Clayton of KZR Racing, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.